I knew something was wrong the moment she called him Danny, not Daniel. Not my son's name, the way I'd spoken it for 32 years. Danny. Soft and familiar, like she'd known him his whole life. Like she'd been there for the little league games and the fevers, and the nights he cried after his father died. She hadn't been. She'd known him for 4 months. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I told myself that a nickname was just a nickname, and that a mother who'd spent 3 years worrying about her son being alone didn't get to complain when he finally brought someone home. I poured the coffee, and I smiled, and I said it was so nice to meet her. Her name was Sabrina. She had dark hair and very white teeth, and she sat at my kitchen table like she'd already measured the room for new furniture. My name is Margaret. I'm 64 years old. I live in a 4-bedroom colonial in Naperville, Illinois, that my husband Gerald and I bought in 1989, the year Daniel was born, the year we thought we had all the time in the world. Gerald died 5 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, 11 weeks from diagnosis to the end. He was 59. I wasn't ready, but nobody ever is. After he died, I kept the house. People told me I shouldn't. Too big, they said. Too many memories. My sister said the upkeep alone would wear me out, but I wasn't ready to let go of the kitchen where Gerald burned every batch of Christmas cookies he ever attempted, or the backyard where Daniel learned to ride his bike by crashing into the rose bushes 14 times before he finally got it. I wasn't ready, so I stayed. I kept teaching. 26 years at Jefferson Middle School, 7th grade English. I retired 2 years ago with a pension, and Gerald had been careful with money his whole life. Careful in the quiet, determined way of a man who grew up without much. When he died, I inherited the house, which we'd paid off in 2018, and a retirement portfolio that his financial advisor told me, somewhat gravely, was just over $900,000. Gerald had also maintained a life insurance policy I hadn't fully understood while he was alive. I understood it afterward. I was not wealthy in the way that people with jets and vacation homes are wealthy, but I was comfortable in a way that made certain kinds of people very interested in me. I didn't understand that yet when Sabrina sat at my kitchen table in September and smiled with all those white teeth. Daniel had met her at a work conference in Chicago. He did something with supply chain management that I had tried to understand for a decade and had mostly stopped pretending. He was good at it. He made a decent salary, and he lived in a nice apartment in Lincoln Park, and he called me every Sunday, without fail, which was the thing I loved most about him, and the thing that would have made Gerald the proudest. He called me on a Sunday in late August, and he said, "Mom, I met someone." His voice had a quality I hadn't heard in years. It reminded me of the way he'd sounded at 17 when he told me he'd made the varsity soccer team. Like he was trying to be calm and couldn't quite manage it. I asked him to tell me about her. She was 34, he said. She worked in marketing. She was originally from Phoenix but had lived in Chicago for 6 years. She was funny, he said. She was sharp. She paid attention. I asked when I could meet her. He said soon. He said he wanted to make sure it was real first. I thought that was mature of him. I thought it showed he was taking it seriously. 4 months later, he brought her to Naperville for the Sunday dinner I cooked every week out of habit, even though it had just been me eating it alone for 3 years. She came through my front door holding a bottle of wine and complimenting my entryway. She said the crown molding was beautiful. She asked if the house was original to the neighborhood or if it had been renovated. I said mostly original, a few updates over the years. She nodded like I'd confirmed something she was already thinking. Daniel was watching her with the expression of a man who believes he has been saved. We ate pot roast, and she asked thoughtful questions and laughed at the right moments and helped clear the plates without being asked. By 8 o'clock, I had talked myself firmly out of the feeling in my stomach that I couldn't name. She called him Danny when she thought I wasn't listening. She came back the following Sunday, and the Sunday after that. By November, she was coming without Daniel sometimes. Stopping by after a yoga class nearby, she said, just to check on me. She brought me a plant once. a small succulent in a terracotta pot. She set it on my windowsill and said she'd read that plants were good for people who lived alone. I thanked her and said I'd had plants my whole life. She laughed and touched my arm and said, "Of course I had. She just wanted to do something nice." The first time she asked about the house was in November. We were sitting in the living room and she was looking at the built-in bookshelves Gerald had installed himself badly in 1994, which I had never replaced because I loved that they were slightly uneven. She asked if I'd ever thought about downsizing. I said not really. She said it must be a lot of work, a house this size, for one person. I said I managed. She nodded slowly, the way people nod when they want you to think they're listening, but they're actually waiting for you to see things their way. Then she said that she and Daniel had been talking and that they both worried about me being here alone. She said that Daniel's apartment had 2 bedrooms and that maybe, just in the interim, while they figured out next steps. I stopped her there. I said I appreciated the concern, but that I was very happy in my home and had no plans to leave it. She smiled and said, of course, she completely understood. She didn't bring it up again that day. But I noticed that she had said figured out next steps. I turned that phrase over in my mind for several days afterward, the way you worry at a loose thread, not pulling it, just aware of it. Daniel called on Sunday and said he hoped I'd had a nice visit with Sabrina. I said I had. He said she really cared about me. He could tell. I said she seemed very attentive. He said he thought she might be the one, Mom. He hadn't used that phrase since a girl named Kelsey in his junior year of college, and that had ended badly. His voice had that quality again, the trying to be calm quality. I said I was glad he was happy. After I hung up, I went to Gerald's desk in the study and opened the bottom left drawer where I kept the deed to the house and the contact information for our estate attorney and the folder with all of Gerald's account documents and the most recent statement from the portfolio. I don't know exactly why I did it. Some instinct that I hadn't yet named. Everything was there. I closed the drawer and told myself I was being paranoid. In December, Sabrina started asking about my health. It was subtle at first. She asked if I'd been sleeping well. She asked about my knees, which I'd had some trouble with years ago, and which were now completely fine. She asked if I was still driving at night because she'd heard that could become difficult. I was 64 years old with a clean bill of health from my physician of 15 years. I ran 3 miles every Tuesday and Thursday. I said my knees were fine and my night vision was excellent. She said she just wanted to make sure I had support. Then she asked, very casually, who my doctor was. She said she had a wonderful internist at Northwestern she could recommend if I was ever looking to make a change. I said I was not looking to make a change. She said of course, but she'd write down the name anyway, just in case. I did not give her my doctor's name. 2 weeks later, I received a call from the front desk at my doctor's office. They said they were just confirming that I had authorized a release of my general health information to a family member. I said I had absolutely not authorized any such thing. There was a pause. They apologized and said there had been some confusion and that they would make a note that no information had been authorized for release to anyone. I sat very still in my kitchen chair after I hung up. I thought about the way she'd asked about my knees, the way she'd nodded slowly in the living room, the phrase next steps, the way she'd said Danny, soft and familiar, like she'd already moved into my life and was quietly rearranging the furniture. I called my attorney, a woman named Ruth who had handled Gerald's estate and who I trusted completely. I did not tell her everything because I did not yet have everything. But I asked her, hypothetically, what someone would need to do to gain access to a surviving spouse's estate while that spouse was still living. She walked me through it patiently. Diminished capacity declarations, healthcare proxies, wills changed under duress, joint accounts opened gradually, property transferred under the guise of caretaking arrangements. I listened to all of it. I asked her to keep the conversation between us. In January, Sabrina stopped by unannounced on a Wednesday afternoon. I had not given her a key. I answered the door, and she was standing there with a tote bag and a very bright smile, and she said she'd been thinking about me and wanted to help me go through some of the clutter in the spare rooms, since Daniel had mentioned I'd been meaning to do it. Daniel had mentioned no such thing. I let her in because I wanted to watch her. She moved through the house with a kind of careful attention. She commented on things. The painting in the hallway. Was that an original or a print? Did I have a lot of valuable items in the house? Had I thought about a home inventory for insurance purposes? I said that my insurance was fully up to date and that my agent handled all of it. She said that was smart. She said that a lot of people didn't realize what they had until it was too late. I watched her stand in the doorway of Gerald's study. She didn't go in, but she looked. That night I went to Gerald's desk and took the folder with the account documents, and I drove to my sister's house and put it in her fireproof safe. I also took the deed. I called Ruth the next morning and told her I wanted to review my will and my healthcare proxy and make sure everything was airtight. She asked if something had happened. I said I was just being thorough. Ruth had known me for 20 years. She said she'd have an appointment ready by the end of the week. What happened next? I didn't plan. I was checking my email on a Thursday evening, something I did every evening after dinner with a cup of decaf, a habit I'd had since Gerald's illness when I'd needed to stay on top of medical correspondence. I had Daniel's email linked to a shared family calendar we'd set up years ago for holidays and appointments. He occasionally sent things there by mistake, addressed to me or to the family account, when he meant to send them privately. That evening, there was a message that had come through the shared account. It was from Sabrina. It was addressed to Daniel, and it had arrived in the shared inbox because Daniel had apparently not fully separated the calendar permissions when he'd set it up 3 years ago, before Sabrina existed in any of our lives. I want to be clear about what I read. I read every word because I needed to be certain, and because I had earned the right to be certain. The email was about me. It was written in the tone of someone who had thought through a plan carefully. It referenced my house by address. It referenced the fact that I was widowed and had no siblings nearby, which was incorrect. My sister lives 40 minutes away, but Sabrina did not appear to know this. It said that the next step would be to get me to agree to a caretaking arrangement, informally at first, which would establish a pattern of dependence. It mentioned that Daniel's name on any financial accounts would need to happen naturally, without pressure, and that she had a contact who specialized in estate restructuring. The phrase she used, in reference to Gerald's portfolio, was accessible liquidity. There was one more line at the end. She wrote, "She's not as sharp as she thinks she is. She'll come around." I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. I thought about Gerald burning Christmas cookies. I thought about Daniel crashing his bike into the rose bushes. I thought about 26 years of teaching children to read carefully, to look at what the words actually said, to trust their own comprehension even when someone else was trying to tell them what a text meant. I was sharp enough. I forwarded the email to Ruth. I called her the next morning before 8 o'clock, and I read it to her over the phone in case she hadn't seen it yet. Ruth was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Margaret, do not delete anything, do not confront anyone yet, and come in this afternoon. I was there by 2. Ruth and I spent 2 hours going through the email and everything else I had documented, the call from my doctor's office, the unannounced visit, the questions about the study, the request about downsizing, the reference to next steps. Ruth said that while some elements were circumstantial, the email was not. She said the reference to the estate restructuring contact was particularly significant. She contacted a colleague who handled elder financial abuse cases. She told me what my options were. I asked her what she recommended. She said, "Protect yourself completely, and then let your son see what he's chosen." The protection came first. Ruth moved quickly. Within 10 days, my estate was restructured into a trust that I controlled entirely, with my sister named as secondary trustee. My healthcare proxy went to my sister as well. My financial accounts were reviewed, and a flag was placed on any requests for account changes or new authorizations. My doctor's office received a formal written instruction that no information was to be released to any party under any circumstances without written authorization from me and confirmation of identity. I did not tell Daniel any of this. I had dinner with him alone on a Sunday in late January at a restaurant in the city. Sabrina was not there. Daniel said she was at a friend's event. He talked about work and about a trip he was thinking about and about how happy he'd been lately. He looked well. He looked like my son. His father's eyes, that particular shade of brown that I had loved for 32 years. I asked him how serious things were with Sabrina. He said he thought he might propose in the spring. I looked at my son across the dinner table, and I thought about all the things I could say and all the ways I could say them. I thought about how he'd sounded on the phone in August, that trying to be calm voice. I thought about how Sabrina had looked in the doorway of Gerald's study, not going in, just looking. I said, "Daniel, I need to show you something." I had printed the email. Ruth had advised me to have it in writing, not just on a screen, not something that could be dismissed as a misread or a misunderstanding. I placed it on the table between the bread basket and the water glasses, and I waited while my son read it. He read it twice. I watched his face. There are moments in motherhood that you do not anticipate and cannot prepare for. The first time your child understands that something has hurt you. The particular silence of a person rearranging everything they believed 10 seconds ago. He looked up at me and he said, "Where did you get this?" I told him about the shared calendar. I told him about the doctor's office call. I told him all of it, carefully, in order, the way I had taught my 7th graders to present evidence, clearly, without embellishment, letting the facts carry the argument. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then he said, "I didn't know." I said I knew he didn't. He said, "She told me she was just worried about you. She said you seemed lonely." I said that I was many things, but I was not lonely. And I was not lost. And I was not in need of anyone's management. He folded the printed email very carefully, the way he used to fold his homework assignments when he was small, with great precision, like the neatness of it could hold something together. He said he was sorry. I reached across the table and put my hand over his, and I said, "You don't have to apologize for being in love with someone. You do have to look clearly at what that person has done." He called Sabrina from the restaurant parking lot while I waited in the car. I couldn't hear the conversation. It lasted 11 minutes. When he got back in the car, he sat quietly for a moment. And then he said she had a lot of explanations. He said she said the email was taken out of context. He said she cried. I didn't say anything. He said, "She had an explanation for every single thing, Mom. Every one." I said that good explanations were easy to construct after the fact. He drove me to the train station because I'd taken the Metra in, and when I got out, he hugged me the way he hadn't since Gerald's funeral, both arms, the way you hold on to something you're afraid of losing. He said he needed some time to think. I said, "Take all the time you need." He broke off the relationship 6 days later. He called me on a Sunday, the regular call, and he told me at the end of it, almost as an aside, like he was reporting a weather change. He said he'd ended things with Sabrina. He said he'd done a lot of thinking and that some of what he'd found, once he started looking, had clarified things considerably. He didn't tell me what he'd found. I didn't ask. He said, "I should have introduced you sooner. You would have seen it faster." I said that some things take the time they take. It's April now. The rose bushes in the backyard are starting to come back, the way they do every year, the way they did the year Gerald died, and the year after that, and every year, I stayed in this house when everyone told me I shouldn't. The succulent Sabrina brought is still on the windowsill. I keep it there, not because I want to, but because it's alive and doing nothing wrong, and I don't see any reason to throw out something alive, just because the person who gave it to me turned out to be something I didn't expect. Daniel comes to Sunday dinner again. He's quieter than he was in the fall. He helps with the dishes and he asks me real questions about my week, and he doesn't use that trying to be calm voice anymore, which I think means he's actually calm. He sat in Gerald's study with me last week and looked at the bookshelves that are slightly uneven and didn't say anything about them. I appreciated that. Ruth finalized everything in February. The trust is solid. My sister has a full copy of every document. My doctor has my instructions in writing. Everything is exactly where it should be, held by exactly the people who should hold it. I earned this house. Gerald and I built this life with 31 years of deliberate, unglamorous work. It was not going anywhere. I am 64 years old. I have a pension, a portfolio, a house with uneven bookshelves, a son who calls me every Sunday, and a physician I have trusted for 15 years. I run 3 miles on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I am not sharp for my age. I am simply sharp. I noticed the way she said Danny. I noticed, and I remembered, and I kept watching. That is all it took. If you are watching this and you have someone in your life who asks too many questions about the things you own, who arrives uninvited, who calls your doctors, who uses the word next steps like they have already made the plans, listen to that thing in your stomach that you don't have a name for yet. Take your documents somewhere safe. Call an attorney you trust. Talk to your doctor before someone else does. You worked for everything you have. You do not have to explain that to anyone. You do not have to apologize for protecting it. And you are not required to be easy to fool just because someone has decided you should be. Pay attention. Write things down. Trust yourself. It's enough. It has always been enough.